Welcome to the Ultimate Upkeep YouTube channel, where we discuss different things Magic the Gathering and Commander related. Today, I'm going to talk about a fun deck with a very low budget, and I'm going to break down all of the cards in the deck and discuss the main strategy and explain exactly how to win with it. So enough talking, and let's get on with the video. Here I'm going to break down the deck and explain the raw stats in it. And so first of all, we're going to start with the budget or the price of the deck. And this deck is under $50 total. This is American prices, and I wanted to keep this deck to a nice budget. And later on, I'm going to be talking about some of the more honorable mentions later on in the video. So next up we have ramp, and there's a fair amount of ramp. There's 18 pieces of ramp because the commander costs 8 mana. So you need to be able to ramp out your commander as fast as possible, which I'll talk about the commander soon. Next up is the main theme, which includes recursion, legendary creatures, and sack outlets, which again, I'm going to talk about it later on in the video once I show the commander and show what it does. So there's 35 plus the commander. Next up, we've got removal, and there's a fair amount of that. There's 9 removal, plus the commander is pretty good removal for creatures on anything that's not legendary, again, later on in the video. Next up is card draw, or card advantage, and we've got 16 pieces of it, because this deck easily runs out of gas. But once we have this much card draw and card advantage, you almost always have cards in hand, and you always are able to play what you want. Next up is lands, 37 lands, which is the fair number that I like to keep on average. I like to have 37 lands in pretty much any deck of mine. Next up is the honorable mentions, which is like cards that are out of the budget of $50, but they'd be really good inclusions in the deck. And there are 5 of those at the end of the video. And again, like in the video with the slivers, there will be some overlap. So here we have the commander. The commander is Piru the Volatile. She costs 2, red, white, black, so very pip heavy. She's a legendary creature, Elder Dragon, just like Nicol Bolas and all the other dragons like that. She has flying and lifelink, and she's a 7/7, so she's a pretty beefy body. At the beginning of your upkeep, you sacrifice Piru the Volatile unless you pay Mardu, which is red, white, and black. When Piru dies, it deals 7 damage to each non-legendary creature. So the way that this commander works is when it dies in any way, so it doesn't have to be sacrificed by its own ability, it's however it dies, it will deal 7 damage to each non-legendary creature. And the cool part about this is that she has lifelink. So if you have an opponent with 2 non-legendary creatures in their commander, and Piru gets killed or you sacrifice her, Piru is going to deal 7 damage to each non-legendary creature, so not the commander, but it'll hit the other 2 creatures. But you will also gain 14 life because every 7 damage that Piru deals, you gain that much life. So this makes the commander a very fun and enjoyable deck because you get to sacrifice your own commander, and the way that the deck works is you put it into the graveyard to bring it back, and basically almost every turn you can kill everything that's not legendary. So the whole deck is loaded up with legendary creatures in order for you to build your own board and to get rid of everyone else's utility creatures and their little like Llanowar elves and mana dorks. And it's a lot of fun to play. The amount of life that you gain just from playing this commander on turn 6 or 7 and sacrificing it with an Altar's Reap is ridiculously good, because I have won games with over 1,000 life with this deck. If you're playing against a token deck, you are in heaven, and it is so much fun. Here we're going to be talking about the ramp, and specifically the cards in the deck that ramp you towards other cards in the deck. So first up, we have 4 and 3 CMC, and CMC means converted mana cost. And on this page, just so that I didn't have to do a whole bunch of extra work, I just kind of put different groupings together so that it would fit better on one page. So 4 and 3 are together, and starting up we have Neheb Dreadhorde Champion, which is a 4 mana, 5/4 Neheb, so he's a zombie Minotaur warrior, that says whenever he deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you may discard any number of cards. If you do, draw that many cards and add that much red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. And what this allows you to do is to dig deeper into your deck, and it ramps you a little bit. So this is also a little bit of like card draw and card advantage, it's kind of all mixed in. And he has trample, so that makes it a lot easier to deal combat damage to a player or planeswalker. Next, we have Mahadi Imperium Master, which is a slightly new card from the Baldur's Gate Commander set. And it's a 3 mana 3/3 Cat Devil that says at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each creature that died this turn. And this is really helpful with your commander, because with this card, you can sacrifice your commander, kill, 5, 6, or 7 creatures, and at your end step, you make 5, 6, or 7 mana, just by having him out on the battlefield, and he won't die because he's legendary. Then we've got Savai Crystal, which is just a 3 mana rock that taps to add Mardu, so red, white, or black. And it has cycling too, so you can discard a card and draw a card. Just a very solid ramp option that gives you all of the colors that we need. Then we've got Commander Sphere, same deal, except instead of cycling, you just sacrifice it to draw a card. Then we've got 2 CMC, which is to convert a mana cost again. And we've got Arcane Signet, which is obviously a staple in any commander deck. Just add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Just an amazing card all around. Then we've got Fire Diamond. It's a red mana rock for 2 mana that enters the battlefield tapped, and you just add red. It's pretty good if you're setting up on turn 2 or 3, getting ready to cast bigger spells. Then in the same vein, we've got the black version with Charcoal Diamond, and we have the white version with Marble Diamond. Next up, we have a few creatures that will end up being killed by the commander, but they're not as important once the commander's out, because if you play the commander and you sacrifice it, you don't want to put it back in your command zone for it to cost 2 mana extra. Instead, you want to put it into your graveyard to cast other spells to recur it from your graveyard. So if these guys end up dying, they're basically just an extra 7 life for you to gain. So we've got the white mirror, mirrors are all 2 mana 1/1s that are artifact creatures, and they can tap for a color. So this one taps for white, this one taps for black, it's Leaden Mirror. Then we have Iron Mirror, which taps for red. And next up, we've got the Signets. So we have an Orzhov Signet, and all Signets are the same except for Arcane Signet, where you tap any color, you tap it, and you add 2 mana depending on the guild color. So Orzhov is, of course, white and black. Next up, we've got Boros Signet, same thing except red and white. Then we've got Rakdos Signet, which is black and red, so basically all the colors that we need. Then we've got Mind Stone, 2 mana, adds 1 mana of a colorless, and you can pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice a Mind Stone to draw a card. Not a bad card at all. Then we've got 1 and 5 CMC, because again, I needed it to fit on one page because I didn't want to have a page with just 1 or 2 cards on it. And now I'm going to let you guys guess. What is the 1 mana artifact that is going to tap for mana? Obviously, it's Sol Ring. Because Sol Ring is an amazing artifact. I included it in all of my decks. It's 1 mana, tap to add colorless, which is such a good ability because it basically just ramps you. Turn 1 Sol Ring, play it. Same turn, play a Marble Diamond, play a Mind Stone, any of the 2 mana rocks. Then we've got our Wayfarer's Bauble, which basically just ramps you out a land card. It's 1 mana to play, 2 mana to tap it and sacrifice it to basically rampant growth. So you search for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then you shuffle your library. Next, we have a card that's 5 CMC. It's a bit bigger, and it's called Life Insurance. It's a very new card from the Commander set of, I think that's, what set was that? New Capenna, that's what it's called. And it has Extort. So whenever you cast a spell, you may pay white and black. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain that much life. So this is a good way to, if you have 3 opponents and you play a spell, pay either 1 white or 1 black, and you can just gain 3 life instantly. And you drain your opponents for 3, or for 1 each. And whenever a non-token creature dies, you lose 1 life and create a treasure token. So if your opponents have 5 non-token creatures that aren't legendary, you can pay 5 life and make a treasure token. It's really, really good. So after talking about the ramp, I'm going to get into the main theme, which there's going to be multiple parts to this. Like I said, recursion, sack outlets, legendary creatures. But the first part is going to be the legendary creatures. And there's quite a few because, as with the commander, who doesn't hit non-legends, you're going to be able to build up a huge board of legendary creatures that all have different abilities that in the end are going to overpower your opponents who won't have as many legends. Sure, you might not hit their commanders, but that's why we have different sorts of removal to get to deal with those. So first up, we're going to start high to low again with 7 CMC. And the first creature that we're going to start off with on this section of the main theme is Lorcan, Warlock Collector. So this is a card from the Commander Forgotten Realms decks. And he says, whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you may pay life equal to its mana cost. If you do, put it onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Warlock in addition to its other types. And then it has an additional thing that says, if a Warlock you control would die, exile it instead. So what this is going to do is, if you use Piru and you say, okay, I'm going to blow up all 5 of your creatures, like all 5 of my opponent's creatures, and they have, let's say, a 2-mana dork and this and that, and you just gain, let's say, I don't know what that would be, 35 life, and they have a big old creature that died from your Piru, you can just be like, okay, I'm going to pay 6 life, and I'm going to get that creature onto the battlefield under my control. And then, if it ends up dying, well, it just gets exiled. It's not a big deal. Next up, we've got one of my favorite cards that I've tried to build a deck around for a while, and that's Khazarov Sengir Pureblood. Khazarov is a 7-mana 4/4 with flying, and says whenever a creature an opponent controls is dealt damage, put a +1/+1 counter on Khazarov Sengir Pureblood. So every time that Piru dies and blows up or deals 7 damage to different creatures, you're going to put 1/1/1 counter for each creature that got blown up. If you're playing against token decks and Piru blows up 17 tokens, Kazarov's going to get 17 counters. And then, just in case, Khazarov has 3 in a red. Khazarov deals 2 damage to target creature, which also really helps in case you need to get a +1/+1 counter, or you need to just deal that extra bit of damage to kill a creature. Next up in the 7 slot is Karavek the Merciless, which is 7 mana, so 5 black and a red. It's a 5/4 creature. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, Karavek the Merciless deals damage to that spell's equal to that spell's mana value to any target. So this is just a legendary creature that can basically just, if your opponent tries to hit something of yours, you just say, okay, you're going to take that much damage. Or if someone casts a big ol', I don't know, an Eldrazi for 15 mana or whatever, you can be like, okay, you're going to take 15 damage. And sometimes that can just kill someone outright. Next up, we have 6 CMC. And the first creature is one that I actually used to have a deck for. I was playing it. Well, I'll just show the creature. It's Sengir the Dark Baron. He has flying and a really fun ability. Whenever another creature dies, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Sengir the Dark Baron. So every time that Piru dies or any other creature, Sengir gets 2 power greater. And whenever another player loses the game, you lose life equal to that player's life total as the turn began, which is just a good way to gain some life. And since Sengir has partner, I tried to make a deck with him using, what's the creature called? I can't actually remember the name of the creature, but it's a white creature that says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you make a 1/1 white spirit. And basically what I would do is I would play Sengir. I'd play a bunch of things like oh man, why can't I remember the name? Like a Fleshbag Marauder, that's the name. And you sacrifice the Fleshbag Marauder, you get 2 counters on Sengir, and then you get a Spirit, which you sacrifice to something else, and then you get 2 more counters. And basically, it was just a big Voltron Aristocrat style deck. And then the next card is Kothafed Soul Hoarder, which is a 6 mana 6/6 with flying that says whenever a permanent owned by another player is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So basically, you kill 6 things with Piru, you lose 6 life, you draw 6 cards. It's a pretty good deal. Next is a card that I really, really like. It's just such a goofy card. It's 6 mana. Her name is Evra Halcyon Witness. It's a 6 mana legendary creature avatar, and it's a 4/4. It has lifelink, and my favorite part of the card is 4 mana, exchange your life total with Evra Halcyon Witness's power. So if you're playing Piru and you have over 100 life, and there's a player with no blockers, and they have no mana open, so you're not afraid of this card getting blown up. You pay 4 mana, put your life total to 4, and you attack for over 100 damage. And the cool part is, you're actually going to gain all that life back from the lifelink. It's just so much fun to just beat people in the face with a big 100 creature. Actually, it would be 104, but it's just a lot of fun. And the next is 5 CMC, and first up we have a card that is only an uncommon, surprisingly, and that's Sir Conrad the Grim. So Sir Conrad says, whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from the battlefield into the graveyard from anywhere other than the ground. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna restart. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. So basically, whenever anything dies, whenever anything is milled into or discarded into a graveyard, or whenever you resurrect something or exile something from your own graveyard, he deals 1 damage to each opponent. And he has a little ability that can matter, but not always. It's 1 in a black, each player mills a card. This could just help you get a few extra bits of damage in. And then coming up, we have Hostforge, who is a 5-mana Boros, it's lower hold because he's from Strixhaven. He's a 4/5. And he says, spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. And it has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. So basically, what you can do is you can have Ghostry on the battlefield, or Hofree, and you sacrifice Piru. Piru will be exiled, and you get a copy of Piru as a token. And then, if that token dies or gets exiled or bounced or anything, you can just take Piru from exile and put it back into the graveyard. So you basically don't have to put it back in the command zone. It's a really good deal. Next up, we have Greven, Predator Captain. Fun card from Commander 2019. It has Menace. It's a 5-mana 5/5. Greven, Predator Captain gets +X/+O, where X is the amount of life you lost this turn. Whenever Greven attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, you draw cards equal to the creature's power, and you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. So this card is very helpful in this deck, because you gain so much life that losing life doesn't really matter. And just 1 attack with Greven, you're drawing 7 cards and losing 7 life. And then you're going to gain all that life back by hitting everything else. Plus, Greven gets +7/+0. It's a really sweet deal. Then we have Arval the Cursed. It's just a 5-mana 3/3 with Death Touch and Lifelink that says other legendary creatures you control get +2/+2. Just a little thing that if you can't kill people with big life gain or whatever, you can just swing in for lethal with all of your legendary creatures. After that, we've got 4 CMC, and starting it off is Whisper, Blood Liturgist, which says sacrifice or tap, sacrifice 2 creatures, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So what you can do is you have Piru, Whisper, and say any other creature. You tap Whisper, sacrifice Piru and the other creature, and once Piru hits the graveyard, you can just bring it right back to the battlefield from there with the same ability. It's really fun. Then we've got a card that I also enjoy called Torolf, God of Fury. It's a MDFC card that's also a god and an equipment on the other side. And it's 4-mana 5/4. It has trample. And whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, so it can't be combat damage, Torolf deals damage equal to the access to any target other than that permanent. So let's say we have Piru, and your opponents have a 1/1 and a 2/2, and you kill Piru, and you end up dealing, let's say, 6 or 5, like a whole bunch of extra damage that you don't need to do. You just get to deal that right to your opponent's face. And the other side isn't as important or useful, but it's called Torolf's Hammer. And it's a legendary artifact equipment. It's only 2 mana. And it says, equipped creature has 1 in a red, unattached Torolf's Hammer. Deals 3 damage to any target. Return Torolf's Hammer to its owner's hand. And equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary. So not entirely important, but I might as well include it. It's not something you would want to be casting though. And it is equipped for 1 in a red. And then we've got Shadowheart Dark Justiciar, which is a really fun card from Baldur's Gate Commander, or like the Commander Legends set. It's 3 in a black. It's a 3/4 creature, human elf cleric, and it says 1 in a black, sacrifice another creature, draw X cards where X is that creature's power. It has to choose a background, but that's not really important because it's in the 99. And sacrificing another creature to draw 7 or X cards, which in this case you'd be sacrificing Piru to draw 7. That's a pretty sweet deal for 2 mana. And then we've got a card that's just a bit of card advantage. It's called his name is Gaunty, Lord of Luxury. 4 mana, 2/3. Death Touch, he has a lot of text, but basically what you do is when he enters the battlefield, you get to look at an opponent's top 4 cards, and you choose one of them, and you basically get to cast it for any color of mana at any time. So you just exile it, and then you can cast it whenever. Then we have Brian Stoutarm, sorry about that. He's a 4-mana Boros commander who I really, really enjoy. He has lifelink, he's a 4/4. Red, tap, sacrifice a creature other than Brian Stoutarm. Brian Stoutarm deals damage equal to the sacrifice creature's power to target player. So it's basically just a fling on a stick, basically. Actually, it would be 104, but it's just a lot of fun. And the next is 5 CMC. And first up, we have a card that is only an uncommon, surprisingly, and that's Sir Conrad the Grim. So Sir Conrad says, whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from the battlefield into the graveyard from anywhere other than the ground. Oh my gosh, I'm going to restart. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. So basically, whenever anything dies, whenever anything is milled into or discarded into a graveyard, or whenever you resurrect something or exile something from your own graveyard, he deals 1 damage to each opponent. And he has a little ability that can matter, but not always. It's 1 in a black, each player mills a card. This could just help you get a few extra bits of damage in. And then coming up, we have Hostforge, who is a 5-mana Boros. It's lower hold because he's from Strixhaven. He's a 4/5. And he says, spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. And it has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. So basically, what you can do is you can have Ghostfree on the battlefield, or Hofree, and you sacrifice Piru. Piru will be exiled, and you get a copy of Piru as a token. And then, if that token dies or gets exiled or bounced or anything, you can just take Piru from exile and put it back into the graveyard. So you basically don't have to put it back in the command zone. It's a really good deal. Next up, we have Greven, Predator Captain. Fun card from Commander 2019. It has Menace. It's a 5-mana 5/5. Greven Predator Captain gets +X/+O, where X is the amount of life you lost this turn. Whenever Greven attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, you draw cards equal to the creature's power, and you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. So this card is very helpful in this deck, because you gain so much life that losing life doesn't really matter. And just 1 attack with Greven, you're drawing 7 cards and losing 7 life. And then you're going to gain all that life back by hitting everything else. Plus, Greven gets +7/+0. It's a really sweet deal. Then we have Arval the Cursed. It's just a 5-mana 3/3 with Death Touch and Lifelink that says other legendary creatures you control get +2/+2. Just a little thing that if you can't kill people with big life gain or whatever, you can just swing in for lethal with all of your legendary creatures. After that, we've got 4 CMC, and starting it off is Whisper, Blood Liturgist, which says sacrifice or tap, sacrifice 2 creatures, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So what you can do is you have Piru, Whisper, and say any other creature. You tap Whisper, sacrifice Piru and the other creature, and once Piru hits the graveyard, you can just bring it right back to the battlefield from there with the same ability. It's really fun. Then we've got a card that I also enjoy called Toril, God of Fury. It's a MDFC card that's also a god and an equipment on the other side. And it's 4-mana 5/4. It has trample. And whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, so it can't be combat damage, Toril deals damage equal to the access to any target other than that permanent. So let's say we have Piru, and your opponents have a 1/1 and a 2/2, and you kill Piru, and you end up dealing, let's say, 6 or 5, like a whole bunch of extra damage that you don't need to do. You just get to deal that right to your opponent's face. And the other side is as important or useful, but it's called Toril's Hammer. And it's in a legendary artifact equipment. It's at only 2 mana. And it says, equipped creature has 1 in a red, unattached Toril's Hammer, deals 3 damage to any target. Return Toril's Hammer to its owner's hand. And equipped creature gets +3/+0 as long as it's legendary. So not entirely important, but I might as well include it. It's not something you would want to be casting though. And it is equipped for 1 in a red. And then we've got Shadowheart Dark Justiciar, which is a really fun card from Baldur's Gate Commander, or like the Commander Legends set. It's 3 in a black. It's a 3/4 creature, human elf cleric, and it says 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature, draw X cards where X is that creature's power. It has to choose a background, but that's not really important because it's in the 99. And sacrificing another creature to draw 7 or X cards, which in this case you'd be sacrificing Piru to draw 7. That's a pretty sweet deal for 2 mana. And then we've got a card that's just a bit of card advantage. It's called his name is Gaunty, Lord of Luxury. 4 mana, 2/3. Death Touch. He has a lot of text, but basically what you do is when he enters the battlefield, you get to look at an opponent's top 4 cards and you choose one of them, and you basically get to cast it for any color of mana at any time. So you just exile it and then you can cast it whenever. Then we have Brian Stoutarm. Sorry about that. He's a 4 mana Boros commander who I really enjoy. He has lifelink. He's a 4/4. Red, tap, sacrifice a creature other than Brian Stoutarm. Brian Stoutarm deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to target player. So it's basically just a fling on a stick, basically, and it's really fun. So continuing on with the legendary creatures of the main theme, we're going to start off with 3 CMC creatures. And first on that list is Tajik Legion's Edge, which I think is a very good inclusion for the deck. I ended up getting it as a promo from my local game store, and I thought it just fit in perfectly. Because with the Iron Mirrors and the different creatures like that, it really helps to have a way to protect them if you have to. So Tajik Legion's Edge is 3 mana for a 3/2. He has Haste and Mentor, which says whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with lesser power. That's not as important. But the important part is prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures you control. So basically, if Piru dies and he goes and he would hit like your mirrors and stuff, instead he just wouldn't hit them. He would only hit your opponent's stuff. And he has red and a white, and he gains first strike. That's also not very important. Next up, we have, which I think is a very good inclusion for the deck. I ended up getting it as a promo from my local game store, and I thought it just fit in perfectly. Because with the Iron Mirrors and the different creatures like that, it really helps to have a way to protect them if you have to. So Tajik Legion's Edge is 3 mana for a 3/2. He has Haste and Mentor, which says whenever this creature attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with lesser power. That's not as important. But the important part is prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures you control. So basically, if Piru dies and he goes and he would hit like your mirrors and stuff, instead he just wouldn't hit them. He would only hit your opponent's stuff. And he has red and a white, and he gains first strike. That's also not very important. Next up, we have Third Path, which isn't one of my favorite cards in the deck, but it's still pretty good. 3 mana, 2/3. You can pay 3 mana and tap it to create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. It's not bad, but it doesn't actually get your commander out from the graveyard. But it does help if you want to get some sort of utility creature out of your deck. And next, we've got the 2 CMC Third Path, which isn't one of my favorite cards in the deck, but it's still pretty good. 3 mana, 2/3. You can pay 3 mana and tap it to create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. It's not bad, but it doesn't actually get your commander out from the graveyard. But it does help if you want to get some sort of utility creature out of your deck. And next, we've got the 2 CMC, which is going to start off with Plarg, Dean of Chaos, and he has a backside because he's also an MDFC. And he's a 1 and a red 2/2, so 2 mana. You can tap, discard a card to draw a card, so you basically get to loot. And then he has an activated ability that's actually kind of interesting. It's 5 mana, tap it. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary non-land card with mana value 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put all revealed cards that were not put on the battlefield on the bottom in a random order. I read that wrong, but that's basically what he does. So he just gets to dig through your deck for something that's not legendary and less than 3 mana. So you can get your soul rings, you can get your arcane signet, you can basically get all of those things just by paying, not for free, but it's a pretty good rate if you don't have anything else to do with your mana. And the backside is, it's hard to read. It's something Dean of Order, but I can't read it because it's too bright. It says other tapped creatures you control get +1/+0, and other untapped creatures you control get +0/+1. Whenever you attack, untap each creature you control, then tap any number of creatures you control. Yeah, So basically what this does, oh, and I found out the word, it's Augusta. I had to look through my deck. So Augusta, Dean of Chaos, or Dean of Order, basically lets you attack and then decide, oh, do I want these ones to have vigilance and get +0/+1 so that they're more protected? It's just kind of a way of working out combat. And then if you have creatures with tap abilities, you just get to untap them all. It's not bad. And the next is Ailey Eternal Pilgrim, which is a 2-mana 2/3 with Death Touch. Already pretty good. It has one, so pay a generic, sacrifice another creature, you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. Or 1 white and a black, so 3 mana, sacrifice another creature, exile target non-land permanent. Activate this ability only if you have at least 10 life more than your starting life total. There's only been one game I've ever played with this deck where I haven't been able to activate that second ability almost right away. And that game was also like I was doing pretty poorly. I couldn't get my commander out, but otherwise it was working really well. And so Ailey just lets you sacrifice your commander for 1 mana. You gain 7 extra life on top of what you're already going to gain. So continuing on with the main theme, I'm going to be talking about recursion. And a very important thing to remember about this deck is don't ever put your commander back into the command zone unless he is exiled, or she, I guess. Because these specific cards that I'm going to be talking about can bring them back from the graveyard, so you don't ever have to pay 8 mana for her again. So first up, we're going to start with 7 and 6 CMC, just so I don't have to make too many different sections. It makes it a bit easier for me. And so starting off, we're going to start with a card called Debtor's Knell, which is just 7 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So basically, you can bring back your commander every turn if you want to, or you could just bring back a big old thing from someone else's graveyard if you wanted. If they say they have a big creature in their graveyard and you're like, I kind of like that one, I'm going to bring that one back instead. My commander can stay there for another turn. Next up, we've got a really fun card that I enjoy. I almost lost a game, but also would have won the game at the same time. Like, it was really weird. It was a super long game, like 2 or 3 hours. And I decided, you know what? Someone's been milling themselves all game. I'm going to see if I can just end the game here. And so the card is Pyrrhic Revival. It's 6 mana, so 3 and then Hybrid Orzhov, Hybrid Orzhov, Hybrid Orzhov. So basically, Hybrid Orzhov is white and black. Like, you can choose what you want to pay. And so it's a sorcery, and it says, each player returns each creature card in his or her graveyard to play with a -1/-1 counter on it. So basically, if you have a whole bunch of creatures in your graveyard that have been dying the whole game, or what I like to use the card for is, I get my commander out, I pay the 3 mana so he sticks around next turn, everyone else has a whole bunch of dead creatures. What I like to do is sacrifice my commander, next turn cast Pyrrhic Revival, bring everything from every single graveyard back, and then kill off my commander again. And what this does is, every single creature in a graveyard, you're going to gain that much life and just kill them all again. Well, you get to keep your creatures. It's a really, it's crazy spicy. Next up, we've got 5 CMC. And the first card is Obsidat's Aid, which is just 5 mana, so 3 in Orzhov. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Simple, just recursion. Then we have Infernal Offering, which is a bit more, it's not complicated, but it's a bit more group huggy-ish, but you can also tailor it to people. So it's 5 mana. The first half of it is choose an opponent. You and that player each sacrifice a creature. Each player who sacrificed a creature this way draws 2 cards. And then the second part is choose an opponent. Return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then that player returns a creature card from their graveyard to the battlefield. So basically what you do is, the first part is you're going to say, okay, you and I, we're going to sacrifice something and draw 2 cards. And then you and I, it could be the same person or a different person, we're going to both return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. So what you can do is you can choose an opponent with no creatures. And you sacrifice your commander, kill everything, and then you get to draw a card. And then say no one has no creatures, and if someone has no creatures in their graveyard, you can just say, okay, I'm going to choose you. You don't get any creatures back, I get my commander. It works really well. Next up, we have Fearsome Awakening, which is 5 mana, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it's a dragon, it gets 2 +1/+1 counters. Same as Obsidat's Aid, just more specific to Piru. Now we're on 4 CMC, and we're going to start with a card that's really, really cheap for some reason. It's 4 mana, late to dinner, and it's called it says, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Create a food token. So it's just another recursion, just like Obsidat's Aid. Then we've got Dread Return, which is 4 mana, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, but it has flashback, sacrifice 3 creatures. So if you really need to get your commander back, you can just sacrifice 3 things and get it back. And last card is Breath of Life. And this is 4 mana, put target creature card from your graveyard into play, but it's basically the same as Late to Dinner, except you don't get a food token. And that's it for Recursion. So then the final part of the main theme is Other, and that's going to include things that we can use as wincons. So they're both 5 CMC, and the first one is Brash Taunter, which is 5 mana, 1/1 creature, but it's indestructible. And whenever Brash Taunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. And you can pay 2 and a red, and Brash Taunter fights another target creature. The cool part about Brash Taunter is if your commander dies, you get to deal 7 damage to the Brash Taunter, but he doesn't die because he is indestructible. So what that does is you just get to do, okay, I'm going to kill my commander, I'll deal 7 damage to you. And you can do that really easily. Then next we've got 5 CMC, or still 5 CMC, but we're going to be including Sanguine Bond as well, which it used to be super expensive, but now, as far as I know, it's only like $3 or $4, which is definitely worth it for this deck. It's 5 mana, enchantment. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So basically, if you're gaining 50, 60 life just from your commander, you can deal 50 or 60 damage to your opponents. So now we're onto the section of removal. And we're going to start from low to high like always, and we're going to start with 6 converted mana cost, which this is mostly going to be board wipes. So I'm including board wipes and single target removal just because it makes it easier to group them all together. So first we're going to have a pretty good card, Austere Command. 6 mana, it's a sorcery, and it says choose 2. Destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. This card will allow you to pick and choose what you want to get rid of. If you want to just destroy artifacts and enchantments because Piru is going to get rid of all of the creatures, that works. If someone has a big giant creature that Piru can't kill, just destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. It works perfectly in this deck. Now we're on to 5 CMC, and we're going to start with Obnixilis Reignited. He's a Planeswalker. He's 5 mana for a 5 loyalty legendary Planeswalker, and it has a +1. You draw a card and you lose 1 life, so it's also card draw. A -3, which is destroy target creature, which is just really useful. And it has a -8 that says target opponent gets an emblem. With whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So we normally will only be using Obnixilis as like a kind of like an engine to draw cards or destroy creatures, but it's also useful to have the option to just, oh, he drew a card, he drew 3 cards, you're going to take 6, 8 damage, whatever it is. Yeah. And then next we have Urza's Ruinous Blast. It's a 5 mana legendary sorcery, which means you can only cast it if you control a legendary creature or a legendary planeswalker, which is fairly easy to do in this deck because almost every single creature and planeswalker is legendary. And it just says exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So that's a pretty useful ability. Coming up next is 4 CMC, and we're starting with Ray of Distortion. It's 4 mana, destroy target artifact and enchantment, and it has flashback for 4 white. So that's pretty useful, just in case you're like, oh, I have 6 mana, I need to destroy that thing, oh, I have flashback, and it's an instant. Now we have 3 and 2 CMC, just to make it easier on me. And we're going to start off with Mortify, which is 1 white-black, instant, destroy target creature or enchantment, so it just gives you more options on what you can destroy. And next is Break Ties, 3 mana, 2 and a white. Choose 1, destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard. And it has a Reinforce for 1, which is 1 white mana, discard this card to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Not terribly important, but the important part is that you can exile a card from a graveyard or just destroy a problematic artifact or enchantment. Next on the 3 and 2 CMC, we have Abolish, which is 1 white, and it says you may discard a Plains card from your hand instead of playing Abolish's mana cost. And it has destroy target artifact or enchantment. So if you have enough mana to cast Piru and you have an extra Plains in your hand, just discard it, and for literally free, you just get to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Then at 2 CMC we have Feed the Swarm. It's 1 and a black. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's converted mana cost, which is pretty helpful if you have a problematic enchantment that you need to deal with. Now we're on to the last section before the lands in the deck, and that section is card draw and card advantage. And so this is anything that can give us either free cards on the battlefield or draw us cards, that kind of stuff. So we're going to start off with 4 converted mana cost, and the first card is Blood Divination, which also I wanted to mention that some of these cards are also sacrifice outlets. So Blood Divination is 4 mana, it's a sorcery, and it says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, so you can sacrifice your commander. Then it says, draw 3 cards. So for 4 mana, you're dealing 7 damage to each non-legendary creature and drawing 3 cards, which is a really good deal. Then we've got Ambition's Cost, which is kind of the same card, except we don't have to discard any cards, or we don't have to sacrifice a creature. So it's 4 mana, draw 3 cards, and lose 3 life. Now we're on to 2 CMC, and we're going to start with Argyle's Bloodfast, which is 2 mana for a legendary enchantment, and it says 1 and a black, pay 2 life, draw a card. And then it has a backside, which I'm not even going to show because it's not very relevant because you're hardly ever going to be below 5 life. Next we have Deadly Dispute, which is 2 mana. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature. So you can sacrifice anything you want. And it says draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. I guess not anything, but you have to sacrifice a creature or artifact. Then we've got Altar's Reap, which is a slightly worse version of Deadly Dispute because it doesn't make a treasure, but it's the same thing. 2 mana, sack a creature, draw 2 cards. Then we have Sign in Blood, which is black, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. It's a sorcery. And that's all there is for card draw and card advantage. So now we're on to the final part of the main deck, and that's going to be the lands. Because of course, to play big spells like Piru, you need to have lands and mana, like mana ramp as well, in order to play big spells. So we're going to start off by going from 3 color all the way down to basic lands. And that's just going to be a good way to kind of balance out the different colors that we need for the deck. So we're going to start with 3 color. And of course, the card that we always include in every single commander deck, unless it's colorless, is Command Tower, which is a land that enters untapped and it adds 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Which means for Piru, this land taps for white, black, or red, which is really powerful. Then we've got Evolving Wilds, which I'm including in 3 mana, like 3 color, because you can get any basic land, which means mountain, plains, or swamp, and this just fixes your colors even more. Then we've got 2 color, and we're going to start off with a card that just kind of balances out some of the ratios that we need for white to black to red, and that's going to be Goldmire Bridge, which is a land, it's an artifact land that enters tapped, it's indestructible, and it has tap, add white or black. It just kind of helps fix some of our colors. Then we've got 2 of the Thriving lands. We've got Thriving Heath, which both of these lands, they enter tapped, and you choose a color other than white, for example, in Thriving Heath. And so Thriving Heath taps for white or the mana of the chosen color. So for example, in the second one, which is Thriving Moor, it enters the battlefield tapped, you choose a color other than black, and you can add black or mana of the chosen color. So say you play Thriving Heath and you're like, okay, I choose red. That means it taps for white or red, or if you need black, it taps for white and black, which really helps you to just choose the color that you need right at that moment. Then we've got 1 color, which is just kind of more utility style lands. We've got Memorial to Folly, which enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps to add a black mana. Or you can pay 2 and a black, tap it, and sacrifice Memorial to Folly, and you return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which helps you just get Piru out of your graveyard if you really need to, if you aren't drawing any recursion. Then we've got the basic lands, which I'm just going to run down quickly. There are 9 plains, there are 14 swamps, and there are 8 mountains, which just kind of, those ratios are made in order to have just the right colors that you need at just the right times, because this deck is very black heavy. So finally, before I round you guys out with final thoughts, these cards that I'm including in the honorable mention section are going to push the budget of $50. So we're using these as honorable mentions that you can include if you have the budget. So if you're looking at the deck lists, which I will include in the description, you'll see these in the Considering tab on Moxfield. So we're going to start off with creatures that would be a good inclusion. And the first creature that I'm going to include is Rhea Dawnbringer, which is 9 mana, it's a 4/6, and has flying. It's a legendary creature angel. And it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to play. This card is about 279, and it's very mana heavy, but it's very useful in this deck, because it doesn't die from Piru, and every single turn you just bring Piru back and then you can sacrifice him some other way. And that just basically gives you almost every turn you're just wiping the board of everyone's creatures, and that can make it really easy for you to pull ahead. Next up, also at 279, we have Yahenni Undying Partisan, which is a legendary creature, Aetherborn Vampire. It's 3 mana for a 2/2, and has haste. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni Undying Partisan. And just a free sacrifice outlet, so sacrifice another creature. Yahenni gains indestructible until end of turn. So what this allows you to do is you can play Yahenni for 3 mana, sacrifice Piru by using Yahenni's ability, and then you can attack with a +10/+10 creature because of all the creatures that would be killed off of Piru. It's very good synergy, and it works really well in this deck. It just got a reprint in the new Double Masters set as well. Then this card, which you would probably want to include if you have the budget for it, is Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. It's 3 mana for a 1/3, and it has the same text as Sanguine Bond. And that text is, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. It has 3 black, creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. So this allows you to use Piru, gain a whole bunch of life, and then an opponent is going to lose that much life. And that can just win you the game outright. Next, we're on to instants, and we're going to start off with a $4.99 instant, so almost $5. And that card is Stinging Study. It's 5 mana for an instant. You draw X cards, and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. So if Piru is 8 mana, you're going to be able to cast Stinging Study and draw 8 cards for 5 mana, which is a crazy good rate, especially at instant speed. Then we're on to artifacts, and we're going to start off with Bolas's Citadel, which is a very cool and spicy artifact, which is 6 mana, 3 black, legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library if you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And then it has another ability, which is tap, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents, each opponent loses 10 life. So what you can do with this is, with your 100, 200, like whatever amount of life that you have, look at the top card. Oh, 5 mana, pay 5 life. 3 mana, pay 3 life. And you can just build a board almost instantly just by paying life that you already had enough of. And finally, we have a really, really expensive card, and that is Aetherflux Reservoir. It's $16.99. It's 4 mana for an artifact. Whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you cast this turn. Pay 50 life, Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player, which is just like a big giant Death Star. So if you have, say, 300 life, you can pay 150 life and kill all 3 of your opponents at once. And that's just a really good and fun thing to do. The only problem is that it's $17 for this card. So this is one card that So this and Vito are cards I would definitely recommend you pick up for the deck if you have it, if you can afford to buy them, or if you already own them in your collection. If you want to upgrade this deck, these are probably the first things you want to put in, as well as maybe upgrading the mana base a little bit with shocks and fetches or whatever you have, even just like a few slow lands and stuff like that. Like, those are the things that would do a lot of help in this deck, because this one often has trouble with getting the right mana, but not always. I mean, I don't want to say often, because most of the time the deck works perfectly fine and I'm winning games all the time with it. Now you're probably asking yourself, how do I play the deck? How do I win with it? Well, here's your answer. First up, you want to ramp, and ramp. You want to get as much mana as you can in order to play your commander as fast as possible. Then, as you're ramping, so you want to ramp and at the same time play your legendary creatures and build up a board. So while you're building a board and ramping, your opponents will be playing things like Llanowar Elves and other dorks that are not legendary. But all of your creatures will be, so by the time you cast your commander, what you want to do as soon as, I usually wait until there's maybe 4 or 5 different non-legendary creatures, and I also try to wait until a time when I can play them and sacrifice it right away in order to get the maximum value, because if you play your commander and then wait a turn or two and it gets exiled, that's not as good. So what you want to do is you want to play your commander while you have a sack of it on board, or you have a card in hand that can sacrifice them for you. And that can make it really useful. Just as soon as you can get value out of your commander, you want to play him. Then you want to use sack effects and recursion in order to clear the board whenever you need. So like, if you have legendary creatures like Lizolda, or even Yahenni if you buy it or whatever, you can almost instantly play your commander, kill him, next turn, oh, someone played something that has less than 7-8 toughness, but they are also like, someone else played 2 things that are weak and they're not legendary. Then you just bring your commander back with recursion and then sacrifice it again. And then you just gain 21 or even more life just by doing that. So whenever you need to clear the board or deal with a threat, just bring your commander back from the graveyard. And one thing you never want to do, at least unless your commander gets exiled, is don't put him back into the command zone. Because that can make it so much harder, because he already costs 8. So if you want to start spending 10 mana and 12 mana just to cast a commander, that's not a very good thing to do. That's not very fun. So you'd rather just recur it with different spells that can bring it back from the graveyard. And so how does the deck win? Well, the deck wins through drain effects, or with attacking with your creatures if you need, while your life total is already so high that no matter what, you won't be killed by commander damage, hopefully. And because of the commander's lifelink, you're still gaining tons of life. So if you have lots of creatures that you can attack with, you can just play tons of creatures and then attack with them. And if you need to, just kill your commander, wipe all of their blockers, and then win through that way. Or if you have cards like Sanguine Bond or Brash Taunter even, you can just deal damage by killing your commander and gaining tons of life just to drain your opponents. So now you've made it close to the end of the video where I'm going to give my final thoughts on this deck. And so overall, this deck is really fun. It's a great budget deck, it works very well, it's very consistent, and overall it's just fun to have tons of life and big creatures that you can just beat people with. And it's so much fun to just have this big dragon where the whole idea of it is for it to just explode into a fiery ball of flame. And the reason that I made this deck in the first place is because I had someone who I played against at my local game store who had this deck, and I never realized that Piru had lifelink and that it worked with the 7 damage. But now that I do, I'm really happy that I'm able to share it with all of you and let you guys know how well that this lifelink actually works. Because I've had games where I've had over 1,000, 2,000 life, and since I do have an Aetherflux Reservoir, I've been able to just win 6 5-player games, or 5-player games, 6-player games, just by Death Starring everyone. And it's so much fun. So I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. And if you did, feel free to like and subscribe, because I'm trying to grow this channel and that will really help. So anything you can do, comment, like, subscribe, whatever, that'll really help. And thanks again. And I hope you all have a really great day. Bye.